Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that a U.S. Foods employee has observed a potential deviation from proper storage temperature guidelines for a perishable food product during a routine delivery inspection at a customer's facility. The employee is concerned this could violate food safety regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee to take? Option A. Ignore the temperature deviation to avoid causing issues with the customer and the supplier relationship. Option B. Immediately contact the relevant federal regulatory agency to report the potential violation without notifying U.S. Foods. Option C. Document the observed temperature deviation with specific details and report it immediately through U.S. Foods' established internal compliance reporting channels. Option D. Directly inform the supplier of the temperature deviation and instruct them to correct their practices without involving U.S. Foods management. Correct answer is C. Document the observed temperature deviation with specific details and report it immediately through U.S. Foods' established internal compliance reporting channels. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an employee of U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts between company policy, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance. The core challenge lies in identifying and reporting potential violations of food safety regulations without jeopardizing business relationships or facing undue pressure. The employee must exercise sound judgment to ensure that all actions align with U.S. Foods' commitment to regulatory adherence and consumer safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the observed issue, including specific details about the product, location, and date, and then reporting it through the established internal channels at U.S. Foods, such as the Compliance Department or a designated ethics hotline. This is the right approach because it directly addresses the potential regulatory violation in a structured and traceable manner. U.S. Foods, as a food distributor, is subject to stringent regulations from bodies like the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. By following internal reporting procedures, the employee ensures that the company can investigate, rectify the issue, and maintain compliance with federal laws such as the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. This also protects the company from potential penalties and safeguards public health. Incorrect approach is analysis. Ignoring the issue is professionally unacceptable because it represents a direct failure to uphold regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. This inaction could lead to the distribution of unsafe food products, resulting in severe health consequences for consumers, significant legal liabilities for U.S. Foods, and reputational damage. Directly confronting the supplier without involving internal U.S. Foods channels is also problematic. While intended to resolve the issue quickly, this bypasses established compliance protocols. It could lead to an incomplete investigation, potential mishandling of evidence, or an inability to ensure consistent application of U.S. food standards and regulatory requirements across all suppliers. Furthermore, it might create an adversarial relationship that hinders future cooperation and transparency. Reporting the issue externally to a regulatory agency before exhausting internal reporting mechanisms is premature and can be seen as a breach of company policy and trust. While whistleblowing is a protected right in certain circumstances, the primary expectation is for employees to utilize internal channels first, allowing the company the opportunity to investigate and self-correct. External reporting without prior internal notification can complicate the company's ability to manage the situation effectively and may have unintended consequences for the employee and the company. Professional reasoning. Professionals at U.S. Foods should adopt a systematic approach to regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the relevant U.S. federal food safety laws and regulations, being aware of company policies and reporting procedures, and maintaining a commitment to ethical conduct. When a potential violation is observed, the decision-making process should prioritize 1. Thorough documentation of the facts, 2. Adherence to established internal reporting protocols, and 3. Seeking guidance from the Compliance Department if unsure about the correct procedure. This ensures that issues are addressed effectively, transparently, and in accordance with all legal and ethical obligations. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that a U.S. Foods warehouse associate has identified a potential foreign object contamination in a batch of incoming produce. The associate is concerned about the safety of the product, but is unsure of the exact nature or extent of the contamination. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the associate to ensure regulatory compliance and product safety? Option A. Immediately quarantine the affected batch of produce and notify the Quality Assurance department for further investigation and testing. Option B. Continue to process and distribute the batch of produce while keeping an eye out for any customer complaints, as the contamination is likely minor. Option C. Attempt to visually inspect the produce further and dispose of any suspicious items without involving other departments to avoid unnecessary disruption. Option D. Inform the immediate supervisor verbally about the concern and wait for their instructions before taking any further action. The correct answer is A. Immediately quarantine the affected batch of produce and notify the Quality Assurance department for further investigation and testing. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex landscape of food safety regulations and internal company policies to ensure compliance and protect public health. The core challenge lies in balancing the urgency of a potential product recall with the need for thorough investigation and accurate reporting, all while adhering to U.S. Foods' established procedures and relevant U.S. federal regulations. Careful judgment is required to avoid premature actions that could unnecessarily disrupt operations or damage the company's reputation, while also preventing the distribution of potentially unsafe products. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented investigation process that prioritizes consumer safety and regulatory adherence. This includes immediate notification of the Quality Assurance department, thorough product testing to confirm the presence of the contaminant, and meticulous documentation of all findings and actions taken. This approach aligns with the principles of the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, which emphasizes proactive prevention of foodborne illnesses and requires food facilities to have plans in place to address potential hazards. By involving QA and conducting rigorous testing, U.S. Foods demonstrates a commitment to its regulatory obligations and its internal safety protocols, ensuring that any recall or corrective action is based on verified data. An incorrect approach that involves immediately initiating a recall without confirming the contamination through testing is professionally unacceptable. This premature action could lead to unnecessary financial losses, damage to supplier relationships, and erosion of consumer trust, all without a verified basis. It bypasses the established investigative procedures designed to ensure accuracy and efficiency. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay reporting the potential issue to QA and instead attempt to resolve it informally, poses a significant regulatory and ethical risk. This could result in the continued distribution of contaminated product, violating FSMA intent, and potentially leading to widespread illness and severe legal and financial repercussions for U.S. Foods. Furthermore, failing to document the investigation and findings undermines transparency and accountability, hindering future audits and investigations. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a structured, evidence-based response. This involves 1. Recognizing and escalating potential food safety concerns according to established protocols. 2. Actively engaging relevant internal departments, like QA, to leverage expertise and resources. 3. Conducting thorough, documented investigations using validated testing methods. 4. Making decisions based on verified data and regulatory requirements. 5. Maintaining clear and comprehensive records of all actions and findings. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not only compliant, but also effective in protecting public health and the company's integrity. Question 3. Research into U.S. Foods' internal procedures and relevant federal regulations reveals a situation where a newly implemented inventory management system appears to be causing delays in the proper temperature monitoring of refrigerated goods. As a U.S. Foods employee, what is the most appropriate immediate action to take regarding this potential food safety concern? Option A. Discuss the system's perceived flaws with colleagues in other departments to gauge their opinions before reporting. Option B. Immediately report the observed delays in temperature monitoring to the U.S. Foods Quality Assurance Department and your direct supervisor. Option C. Attempt to manually override the new system's reporting to ensure temperature logs appear compliant. Option D. Continue to monitor the situation discreetly and wait to see if any actual product spoilage occurs before taking action. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the observed delays in temperature monitoring to the U.S. Foods Quality Assurance Department and your direct supervisor. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an employee of U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts between company policy and regulatory requirements, specifically concerning food safety and handling. The core challenge lies in ensuring that operational efficiency does not compromise the integrity of the food supply chain, which is heavily regulated in the United States. Careful judgment is required to balance business needs with the absolute priority of public health and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the observed issue to the appropriate internal channels responsible for food safety and quality assurance at U.S. Foods. This aligns with the principles of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct expected of employees in the food industry. Specifically, it adheres to the Food Safety Modernization Act (FSMA) and other relevant FDA regulations, which mandate proactive identification and mitigation of food safety risks. By reporting the issue, the employee fulfills their responsibility to uphold U.S. Foods' commitment to food safety and to comply with federal law, ensuring that any potential hazards are addressed promptly by those with the authority and expertise to do so. An incorrect approach of ignoring the observed issue is a direct violation of regulatory obligations and ethical standards. It demonstrates a disregard for food safety protocols and could lead to the distribution of potentially unsafe products, resulting in severe public health consequences and significant legal and financial repercussions for U.S. Foods. This failure to act is contrary to the principles of due diligence and responsible corporate citizenship. Another incorrect approach of attempting to rectify the issue independently without proper authorization or expertise is also professionally unacceptable. While stemming from a potentially good intention, it bypasses established safety procedures and could inadvertently worsen the situation or create new hazards. This approach undermines the structured food safety management systems that U.S. Foods is required to have in place under regulations like FSMA, which rely on trained personnel and defined protocols for addressing deviations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies related to food safety and reporting, as well as a working knowledge of applicable U.S. food safety regulation. When an employee observes a potential food safety concern, the immediate step should be to document the observation and then report it through the designated internal channels, such as a supervisor, the Quality Assurance Department, or a dedicated food safety hotline. This ensures that the issue is handled by the appropriate personnel who can implement corrective actions in compliance with regulatory requirements. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that quickly restocking a pallet of canned goods with minor dented cans, rather than segregating and inspecting each can individually as per U.S. Food standard operating procedure, would save significant labor time. However, the dented cans are on the exterior of the pallet, and the internal product appears unaffected. What is the most appropriate course of action for the U.S. Foods associate? Option A. Segregate the pallet and inspect each can for integrity and potential seal compromise, following U.S. Foods' established protocol for damaged goods. Option B. Discard the entire pallet of canned goods to err on the side of caution, despite the apparent minor nature of the damage. Option C. Restock the pallet immediately to maximize efficiency, as the damage appears superficial and the product is likely still safe. Option D. Attempt to straighten the dented cans and repackage them to make them presentable for restocking. Correct answer is A. Segregate the pallet and inspect each can for integrity and potential seal compromise, following U.S. Foods' established protocol for damaged goods. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to U.S. Foods' internal policies and potentially broader food safety regulations, even when those policies might seem overly cautious or burdensome. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying guidelines in a real-world situation where a minor deviation could have significant implications for product integrity and consumer trust. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising safety standards for the sake of expediency. The correct approach involves meticulously following U.S. Foods' established procedures for handling damaged goods, even if the damage appears superficial. This aligns with the company's commitment to quality control and risk mitigation. Regulatory justification stems from the overarching principles of food safety and product integrity, which are implicitly supported by federal regulations like the Food Safety Modernization Act (FSMA) and state/local health codes. While FSMA focuses on prevention, the principles extend to ensuring that only safe and wholesome food reaches consumers, which necessitates strict internal controls for damaged products. Ethically, this approach upholds the company's responsibility to its customers and the public to provide safe, high-quality products. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over established protocol fails to recognize the potential for hidden damage or contamination. Even minor damage to packaging can compromise the product's integrity, making it susceptible to spoilage or adulteration. This disregard for procedure could lead to the distribution of unsafe food, violating fundamental food safety principles and potentially leading to regulatory violations, product recalls, and severe damage to U.S. Food's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which involves attempting to repair the packaging without proper authorization or understanding of food-grade repair materials, is also professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses established quality assurance checks and introduces an unknown variable into the product's handling. It risks further contamination or the use of non-food safe materials, directly contravening food safety standards and company policy. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies and relevant regulations. When faced with a situation that deviates from the norm, the default should always be to consult and adhere to established protocols. If there is ambiguity, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the quality assurance department is paramount. This ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of potential risks and in compliance with all applicable standards, prioritizing safety and integrity above all else. Question 5. Comparative studies suggest that effective operational management within the food distribution sector hinges on robust adherence to quality control and regulatory compliance. If a U.S. Foods employee observes a discrepancy in product labeling that appears to violate U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) guidelines regarding ingredient disclosure, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure U.S. Foods maintains regulatory compliance and upholds its commitment to consumer safety? Option A. Attempt to correct the labeling on the product discreetly before shipment to avoid any delays or complications. Option B. Immediately report the labeling discrepancy to their direct supervisor and the designated quality assurance department, providing all observed details. Option C. Proceed with the shipment as scheduled, assuming the discrepancy is minor and unlikely to cause harm. Option D. Discuss the labeling issue with colleagues to gauge their opinions before deciding on a course of action. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the labeling discrepancy to their direct supervisor and the designated quality assurance department, providing all observed details. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an employee of U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts between company policy, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance in a real-world operational setting. The core challenge lies in ensuring that all actions taken by U.S. Foods employees adhere to the strict regulatory framework governing food safety and distribution within the United States, specifically as it pertains to the U.S. Foods hiring assessment test scope. Misinterpreting or disregarding these regulations can lead to severe consequences, including product recalls, fines, reputational damage, and potential legal action. Careful judgment is required to identify and address any deviations from established standards promptly and effectively. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and reporting a potential violation of U.S. Foods' internal quality control procedures, which are designed to align with federal food safety regulations. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. By immediately escalating the issue through the designated channels, the employee ensures that U.S. Foods can investigate, rectify the situation, and prevent any compromised product from reaching consumers. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and the overarching goal of maintaining public health and safety, which are paramount in the food industry and are implicitly tested in a hiring assessment. An incorrect approach of ignoring the observed issue and proceeding with the shipment would be a direct violation of food safety regulations and U.S. Foods' own operational standards. Failure to act would place consumers at risk and expose the company to significant liability. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to conceal the issue or alter records, constitutes fraudulent behavior and a severe breach of ethical and regulatory obligations. This not only undermines the integrity of the food supply chain, but also carries severe legal penalties. A third incorrect approach, such as discussing the issue informally with colleagues without reporting it through official channels, fails to ensure proper documentation and timely resolution, leaving the company vulnerable to continued noncompliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the relevant regulations, company policies, and reporting procedures. When faced with a potential noncompliance issue, the process should be: 1. Observe and document the specific details of the potential violation. 2. Consult company policy and relevant regulations to understand the implications. 3. Report the issue immediately through the established internal reporting mechanisms. 4. Cooperate fully with any investigation. This systematic approach ensures that issues are addressed responsibly and in accordance with legal and ethical standards. Question 6. Strategic planning requires U.S. Foods to optimize its cold chain logistics for perishable goods. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with relevant U.S. federal food safety regulations? Option A. Focusing on reducing fuel costs by allowing for slightly longer transit times, with the understanding that minor temperature fluctuations are acceptable for most products. Option B. Implementing a new route optimization software that prioritizes the fastest delivery times, with a secondary check for temperature logs only if a driver reports an issue. Option C. Developing a comprehensive cold chain management plan that includes real-time temperature monitoring, documented corrective actions for deviations, and regular audits of all transportation partners against FDA and USDA guidelines. Option D. Relying on established driver experience and anecdotal evidence of successful temperature maintenance for perishable shipments, assuming current practices meet regulatory standards. The correct answer is B. Implementing a new route optimization software that prioritizes the fastest delivery times, with a secondary check for temperature logs only if a driver reports an issue. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because U.S. Foods, as a large food distributor, operates under stringent federal and state regulations concerning food safety, handling, and transportation. Ensuring compliance with these regulations is paramount to public health and the company's reputation. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with the absolute necessity of adhering to these complex legal frameworks. A failure in regulatory compliance can lead to severe consequences, including product recalls, fines, legal action, and loss of consumer trust. The correct approach involves proactively integrating regulatory compliance into the strategic planning process for U.S. Foods distribution network. This means not just reacting to regulations, but anticipating them and building systems and protocols that inherently support adherence. This approach is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principles of responsible corporate governance and the legal obligations imposed by bodies such as the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the Department of Agriculture, USDA. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, and other relevant food safety standards, which mandate preventative controls and robust record-keeping. By embedding compliance into strategy, U.S. Foods minimizes risk and demonstrates a dedication to consumer safety, which is a core ethical and legal imperative. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal mandates and a prioritization of profit over public safety. Such an approach could lead to shortcuts in temperature control, sanitation, or traceability, directly violating FDA and USDA regulations and potentially exposing consumers to foodborne illnesses. Another incorrect approach that relies on outdated or informal compliance methods is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the evolving regulatory landscape and the need for systematic, documented processes. Relying on informal checks or assuming past practices are still compliant ignores the dynamic nature of food safety regulations and the potential for significant legal and ethical breaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that explicitly includes regulatory compliance. This means consulting with legal counsel and compliance officers, conducting regular audits, and investing in training and technology to ensure adherence to all applicable U.S. federal and state food safety laws and guidelines. Strategic decisions should always be vetted against these regulatory requirements to ensure they are not only economically viable, but also legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 7. Regulatory review indicates that U.S. Foods is considering a new automated inventory management system for its distribution centers that utilizes advanced sensor technology. Before full implementation, what is the most critical step U.S. Foods must undertake to ensure compliance with U.S. food safety regulations? Option A. Perform a comprehensive evaluation of the system's adherence to all applicable federal and state food safety laws, including its impact on product integrity, sanitation, and temperature control throughout the supply chain. Option B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the system's compatibility with existing IT infrastructure and its potential for operational efficiency gains. Option C. Implement the system on a pilot basis in a single distribution center to gauge its effectiveness and identify any immediate operational issues. Option D. Obtain written assurances from the technology vendor that the system meets all relevant FDA and USDA guidelines for food handling and storage. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the system's compatibility with existing IT infrastructure and its potential for operational efficiency gains. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a regulated industry like food distribution, where U.S. Foods must adhere to a complex web of federal and state regulations concerning food safety, handling, and transportation. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency and cost-effectiveness with the absolute imperative of regulatory compliance. A new, potentially cost-saving technology might offer benefits, but its implementation must be rigorously vetted against established legal and safety standards to prevent potential harm to consumers, reputational damage, and significant legal penalties for U.S. Foods. The pressure to innovate and remain competitive can sometimes create tension with the need for thorough due diligence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the proposed technology's compliance with all applicable U.S. federal and state food safety regulations, including those from the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the Department of Agriculture, USDA, as well as any relevant state-specific food handling and transportation laws. This includes verifying that the technology does not compromise the integrity of the food products, that it meets sanitation standards, and that it supports the maintenance of required temperature controls throughout the supply chain. This proactive, evidence-based assessment ensures that U.S. Foods is not only meeting, but exceeding its legal obligations, thereby protecting public health and its own operational integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the technology solely based on projected cost savings without a thorough regulatory compliance review is a significant ethical and legal failure. This approach prioritizes financial gain over consumer safety and legal adherence, potentially exposing U.S. Foods to severe penalties, product recalls, and loss of consumer trust. Adopting the technology based on the vendor's assurance of compliance without independent verification is also problematic. Vendors should be knowledgeable. U.S. Foods retains the ultimate responsibility for ensuring its operations meet regulatory standards. Relying solely on a third party's word without due diligence constitutes negligence and a failure to exercise reasonable care. Proceeding with a limited, superficial review that only checks for obvious violations, but misses nuanced requirements or potential indirect impacts on food safety, is insufficient. Regulatory frameworks are often intricate, and a comprehensive understanding is necessary to identify all potential risks and ensure full compliance. This approach risks overlooking critical aspects that could lead to noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals at U.S. Foods should adopt a systematic risk-based approach to evaluating new technologies. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory bodies and their specific requirements pertaining to the technology's intended use. 2. Conducting a thorough due diligence process that includes independent verification of the technology's performance against these regulations, potentially involving third-party audits or expert consultations. 3. Documenting all findings and decisions, ensuring a clear audit trail. 4. Prioritizing consumer safety and regulatory compliance above all other considerations, including short-term cost savings. 5. Establishing clear internal protocols for technology adoption that mandate comprehensive compliance checks before implementation. Question 8. Consider a scenario where a U.S. Foods Distribution Center employee notices a pallet of packaged salad products exhibiting signs of potential temperature abuse during unloading, indicated by condensation on the packaging and a slightly softened texture. The employee is aware that U.S. Foods has strict food safety protocols. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the employee to take? Option A. Discreetly remove the affected pallet from the receiving area and dispose of the product to avoid any potential issues or delays. Option B. Attempt to repackage the salad products to improve their appearance and then proceed with normal receiving procedures. Option C. Inform a fellow employee about the observation and ask for their opinion on whether the product appears to be compromised. Option D. Immediately report the observed condition of the salad products to their direct supervisor and the Quality Assurance Department, following U.S. Foods' established incident reporting procedures. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the observed condition of the salad products to their direct supervisor and the Quality Assurance Department, following U.S. Foods' established incident reporting procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts between company policy, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance in a real-world operational setting. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need to address a product quality issue with the imperative to follow established procedures for reporting and resolution, ensuring both food safety and legal adherence. Careful judgment is required to prevent potential harm to consumers and to protect U.S. Foods from regulatory penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the observed issue through the designated internal channels, such as the Quality Assurance Department or a supervisor, as per U.S. Foods' established food safety protocols, and in alignment with general food safety regulations like the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. This ensures that the issue is documented, investigated by trained personnel, and addressed according to established procedures designed to prevent the distribution of potentially unsafe products. This aligns with the regulatory expectation that food companies have robust systems in place to identify and mitigate food safety risks. An incorrect approach of discarding the product without reporting it bypasses established safety protocols and regulatory requirements. This failure to document and report a potential food safety concern could lead to the distribution of compromised product, violating FSMA intent, and potentially leading to consumer illness and significant regulatory action against U.S. Foods. Another incorrect approach of informing only a colleague without following official reporting channels is insufficient. While well-intentioned, it does not guarantee the issue will be escalated to the appropriate authorities within U.S. Foods or addressed systematically. This informal communication fails to meet the company's internal control requirements and the broader regulatory expectation for documented food safety management. A further incorrect approach of attempting to fix the product without proper authorization or knowledge of the specific issue's root cause, also problematic. This could inadvertently mask the problem, fail to address the underlying cause, or even exacerbate the safety concern, leading to potential distribution of unsafe food and noncompliance with food safety standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies and relevant regulations. When an issue arises, the immediate steps should be to 1. Identify the nature of the potential problem. 2. Consult internal policies and procedures for reporting and handling such issues. 3. Utilize the designated reporting channels to inform the appropriate personnel or department. 4. Cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation and follow established corrective actions. This systematic approach ensures that all food safety concerns are addressed effectively, compliantly, and ethically. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that a U.S. Foods employee has a close personal friend who works for a competitor and is seeking non-public information about U.S. Foods' upcoming pricing strategies and a list of key clients. The employee is considering sharing this information to foster a potential future business partnership with the friend. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical professional conduct for a U.S. Foods employee? Option A. Politely decline the request explaining that sharing such information is against company policy and could have serious consequences, and offer to discuss general industry trends if appropriate. Option B. Ignore the friend's request, assuming they will eventually stop asking. Option C. Provide the friend with publicly available information about U.S. Foods' general market position, hoping it satisfies their curiosity without revealing confidential details. Option D. Share the requested pricing strategies and client list with the friend, believing it will strengthen a future business relationship. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the request, explaining that sharing such information is against company policy and could have serious consequences, and offer to discuss general industry trends if appropriate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with company policies and relevant U.S. regulations concerning fair business practices and data privacy. The core of the challenge lies in balancing personal relationships with professional responsibilities and preventing the misuse of confidential information. Careful judgment is required to uphold ethical standards and avoid any perception or reality of impropriety. The correct approach involves prioritizing U.S. Foods' established policies and relevant U.S. federal and state regulations regarding data privacy and fair competition. This means refraining from sharing any non-public information about U.S. Foods' pricing strategies or customer lists with a friend, even if the friend is a potential business partner. The justification for this approach is rooted in the legal and ethical obligation to protect proprietary information, prevent insider trading or unfair competitive advantages, and maintain the trust of U.S. Foods clients and stakeholders. Adherence to the company's code of conduct and any applicable regulations, such as those that might govern trade secrets or anti-competitive practices, is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to share the requested information, even with the intention of fostering a future business relationship. This action would represent a direct violation of U.S. Foods confidentiality agreements and potentially U.S. laws concerning trade secrets and unfair business practices, could lead to severe disciplinary action, including termination and legal repercussions for both the employee and potentially the company. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request without any communication. While this avoids direct disclosure, it could be perceived as unprofessional and might still leave U.S. Foods vulnerable if the friend pursues the information through other means, or if the employee's silence is misinterpreted. A third incorrect approach would be to share generalized information that is publicly available but not the specific, proprietary details requested. This is still problematic as it could inadvertently lead to the friend inferring or seeking out the confidential information, and it blurs the line between acceptable and unacceptable disclosure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory considerations. This involves consulting company policies, codes of conduct, and seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments when in doubt. The principle of when in doubt, err on the side of caution, is critical. Professionals must always act in the best interest of their employer and uphold the integrity of their role, prioritizing compliance and ethical conduct over personal relationships or potential short-term gains. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that a batch of U.S. Foods branded salad mix has been inadvertently labeled with an incorrect best by date, potentially leading to the distribution of product past its recommended consumption period. Option A. Immediately quarantine the affected batch, conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the labeling error, implement corrective actions to prevent recurrence, and verify the accuracy of the corrected labeling before releasing any product. Option B. Discard the entire affected batch of salad mix to avoid any potential risk to consumers. Option C. Continue with the distribution of the affected batch, assuming consumers will exercise their own judgment regarding freshness. Option D. Immediately relabel the affected batch with the correct best by date without further investigation into how the error occurred. The correct answer is A. Immediately quarantine the affected batch, conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the labeling error, implement corrective actions to prevent recurrence, and verify the accuracy of the corrected labeling before releasing any product. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating potential conflicts between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance within the context of U.S. Foods business practices. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all actions taken by employees adhere strictly to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) regulations concerning food safety and labeling, as well as any internal U.S. foods policies designed to uphold these standards. A hasty or incomplete response could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and most importantly, risks to public health. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the discrepancy and implement a corrective action that is both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the labeling discrepancy, followed by immediate corrective actions to rectify the issue and prevent recurrence. This aligns with the FDA's emphasis on proactive food safety management systems, such as hazard analysis and critical control points, HACC principles, which mandate identifying and controlling potential hazards, including mislabeling. Specifically, the FDA's Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act requires accurate labeling of food products. A systematic approach ensures that U.S. Foods not only addresses the immediate problem, but also strengthens its internal controls to prevent future violations, demonstrating a commitment to regulatory compliance and consumer safety. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust and avoiding penalties. An incorrect approach of simply discarding the affected product without investigation fails to identify the root cause of the labeling error. This could be a systemic issue in the production or labeling process, meaning similar errors could occur again. It also bypasses the regulatory requirement to understand and report such discrepancies. Another incorrect approach of immediately relabeling the product without a thorough investigation and verification of the correct information is also problematic. This could lead to the product being labeled with incorrect or misleading information, which is a direct violation of FDA regulations. Furthermore, it doesn't address the underlying process failure. Finally, an approach that involves ignoring the discrepancy and hoping it goes unnoticed is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a disregard for consumer safety and a deliberate attempt to circumvent legal obligations, which can result in severe penalties and damage to U.S. Foods' reputation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory adherence and consumer safety. This involves 1. Immediate identification and containment of the issue. 2. A comprehensive documented investigation to determine the cause. 3. Implementation of corrective and preventive actions, COPPA, based on the investigation's findings. 4. Verification of the effectiveness of the COPPA. And 5. Reporting to relevant authorities if required by regulation. This structured process ensures that all aspects of the problem are addressed systematically and in compliance with applicable laws and guidelines. Question 11. The analysis reveals that U.S. Foods is experiencing a high demand for warehouse associates, leading to pressure to expedite the hiring process. A hiring manager proposes obtaining background check information on candidates immediately upon application submission to speed up the review process, without first providing the candidates with a separate disclosure document or obtaining their written authorization. What is the most appropriate course of action for U.S. Foods to ensure compliance with federal regulations regarding background checks for employment? Option A. Inform candidates verbally that a background check will be conducted and proceed with obtaining the report, assuming their continued application implies consent. Option B. Obtain a clear, standalone disclosure from each applicant stating that a consumer report may be obtained for employment purposes and secure their written authorization before requesting any background check information. Option C. Request background check information from informal sources or publicly available data without formal disclosure or authorization to expedite the process. Option D. Proceed with obtaining background checks immediately after application submission, as the urgency of hiring justifies bypassing preliminary disclosure and authorization steps. The correct answer is D. Proceed with obtaining background checks immediately after application submission, as the urgency of hiring justifies bypassing preliminary disclosure and authorization steps. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating potential conflicts between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance within the context of U.S. Foods hiring practices. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that all hiring processes, particularly those involving background checks, strictly adhere to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, and relevant Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EOC, guidelines, while also meeting U.S. Foods business needs for timely staffing. A failure to do so can lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a negative impact on employee morale. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and diligent application of FCRA requirements for obtaining consumer reports for employment purposes. This includes providing a clear, standalone disclosure to the applicant, obtaining their written authorization, and ensuring that adverse action procedures are followed if information from a consumer report leads to a decision not to hire. This approach is ethically sound and legally mandated, protecting both the applicant's rights and U.S. Foods from potential litigation by demonstrating a commitment to fair and compliant hiring practices. An incorrect approach that bypasses the FCRA disclosure and authorization requirements before obtaining a background check is a direct violation of federal law. This failure to obtain proper consent undermines the applicant's privacy rights and exposes U.S. Foods to significant legal penalties, including fines and lawsuits. Another incorrect approach, which involves using information from a background check without following the mandated adverse action process, i.e., providing the applicant with a pre-adverse action notice, a copy of the report, and a summary of their rights before making a final decision, also constitutes an FCRA violation. This omission deprives the applicant of an opportunity to dispute inaccurate information and can lead to legal challenges. Finally, an approach that relies on informal or undocumented background checks, or that uses information from sources not covered by the FCRA without proper legal basis, risks violating privacy laws and creating an unfair hiring process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulations, e.g., FCRA, EOC guidelines. 2. Understanding the specific requirements of each regulation as they pertain to the task at hand, e.g., disclosure, authorization, adverse action. 3. Implementing internal policies and procedures that directly map to these regulatory requirements. 4. Providing regular training to hiring personnel on these policies and regulations. 5. Seeking legal counsel when in doubt about compliance. This systematic approach ensures that operational goals are pursued within a legally and ethically sound framework. Question 12. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a U.S. Foods employee has received customer financial data that requires analysis to identify potential sales opportunities. The employee is considering several methods to access and review this data. Which of the following actions best aligns with U.S. Foods' regulatory compliance obligations and data security best practices? Option A. Transmit the customer financial data securely to the designated U.S. Foods IT security team for analysis. Option B. Send the customer financial data directly to the sales manager for review with a verbal assurance of confidentiality. Option C. Forward the customer financial data to a personal email address for later review. Option D. Share the customer financial data via a public cloud storage link without any access restrictions. Correct answer is A. Transmit the customer financial data securely to the designated U.S. Foods IT security team for analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for U.S. Foods employees regarding the proper handling of sensitive customer information, specifically financial data. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data processing with the stringent legal and ethical obligations to protect customer privacy and prevent data breaches. Mismanagement of this information could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust, all of which are critical concerns for a company like U.S. Foods operating in a highly regulated industry. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves securely transmitting the customer financial data to the designated U.S. Foods IT security team for analysis. This is the most appropriate method because it adheres to established data protection protocols and regulatory requirements, such as those potentially outlined by the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, if financial institutions are involved, or general data privacy principles enforced by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. By routing the data through the IT security team, U.S. Foods ensures that the information is handled by personnel trained in data security, that appropriate encryption and access controls are in place, and that the data is processed in a manner compliant with all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy laws. This method prioritizes data integrity and confidentiality. Incorrect approaches analysis. sending the customer financial data directly to the sales manager for review, even with a verbal assurance of confidentiality, is an incorrect approach. This bypasses established security protocols and places sensitive financial information in the hands of an individual who may not have the necessary training or authorization to handle such data securely. This action creates a significant risk of unauthorized disclosure or accidental data breach, violating principles of data stewardship and potentially contravening data privacy regulations. Forwarding the customer financial data to a personal email address for later review is also an incorrect approach. Personal email accounts are generally not secured to the same standards as corporate systems and lack the necessary audit trails and access controls required for handling sensitive financial information. This practice significantly increases the risk of data interception, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with data protection laws, exposing both the customer and U.S. Foods to severe risks. Sharing the customer financial data via a public cloud storage link without any access restrictions is a highly incorrect and dangerous approach. Public cloud storage, especially without proper configuration, offers minimal security and is prone to unauthorized access. This action represents a gross negligence in data handling and a direct violation of data privacy and security best practices, likely leading to severe regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals at U.S. Foods must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes data security and regulatory compliance. When encountering sensitive customer information, the first step should always be to consult internal policies and procedures regarding data handling. If unsure, seeking guidance from the IT security department or legal counsel is paramount. The principle of least privilege and the need-to-know basis should guide all data access and sharing decisions. Employees must understand that the protection of customer data is a fundamental responsibility, and any deviation from established secure protocols carries significant professional and legal consequences. Question 13. To address the challenge of maintaining food safety and customer trust at U.S. Foods, what is the most appropriate action for a customer service representative to take when a customer reports finding an unusual foreign object in a product that could pose a health risk? Option A. Advise the customer to discard the product and offer a discount on their next order without documenting the specific nature of the object. Option B. Inform the customer that U.S. Foods does not handle such complaints and suggest they contact the manufacturer directly. Option C. Immediately escalate the complaint to the quality assurance and safety departments according to U.S. Foods' established reporting protocols. Option D. Offer the customer a full refund and assure them it's an isolated incident without further internal reporting. The correct answer is D. Offer the customer a full refund and assure them it's an isolated incident without further internal reporting. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for U.S. Foods employees regarding the proper handling of customer complaints that may involve potential safety or quality issues. The professional challenge lies in balancing efficient customer service with the imperative to adhere to U.S. Foods' internal policies and relevant food safety regulations. A failure to escalate appropriately could lead to compromised product safety, damage to U.S. Foods' reputation, and potential legal repercussions. Conversely, over-escalation could strain resources and create unnecessary bureaucracy. Therefore, careful judgment is required to identify when a complaint necessitates formal reporting beyond immediate customer service resolution. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves recognizing that certain customer complaints, particularly those suggesting a potential food safety hazard or significant quality defect, must be escalated according to U.S. Foods' established procedures. This aligns with regulatory expectations for food businesses to have systems in place for reporting and investigating such issues. By following internal protocols for reporting to the quality assurance or safety department, employees ensure that potential risks are formally documented, investigated by subject matter experts, and addressed in compliance with regulations like the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, which mandates preventive controls and robust record-keeping for food safety. This proactive approach protects consumers and the company. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the complaint as a minor issue and offer a simple refund without further investigation or reporting. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a systemic problem that could affect other customers or batches of product. Ethically and regulatorily, this approach neglects the duty of care to consumers and bypasses established food safety protocols designed to prevent widespread harm. Another incorrect approach is to immediately involve legal counsel for every complaint, regardless of its severity. While legal counsel is important for significant issues, this approach is inefficient and bypasses the internal expertise of departments like quality assurance, which are specifically equipped to handle initial assessments of food safety and quality concerns. It also fails to leverage the established reporting structure designed for timely and appropriate resolution. A third incorrect approach is to only document the complaint in the customer service log without any internal notification to relevant departments. This creates a knowledge gap within the company regarding potential product issues. It means that the quality assurance or safety teams are not alerted to potential hazards, preventing them from initiating investigations, implementing corrective actions, or fulfilling regulatory reporting obligations if necessary. This lack of internal communication is a significant failure in a company's food safety management system. Professional reasoning. Professionals at U.S. Foods should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes consumer safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Actively listening to and thoroughly documenting the customer's complaint. 2. Assessing the nature of the complaint. Is it a simple service issue, or does it suggest a potential food safety or significant quality defect? 3. If a potential safety or quality issue is indicated, immediately follow U.S. Foods' established internal reporting procedures to escalate the complaint to the appropriate department, e.g., quality assurance, safety. 4. If the complaint is purely a service issue with no safety implications, resolve it efficiently while still documenting it appropriately. This structured approach ensures that all potential risks are managed effectively and in accordance with both company policy and regulatory requirements. Question 14. The review process indicates that a U.S. food sales representative has received a request from a customer for detailed sales data that may include personally identifiable information, PI, of the customer's employees. The representative is unsure if releasing this data, as requested, would comply with U.S. federal and state data privacy laws and U.S. Foods internal data handling policies. Which of the following actions should the U.S. food sales representative take? Option A. Attempt to interpret the relevant U.S. federal and state data privacy laws independently and then decide whether to release the data based on that interpretation. Option B. Release the requested data to the customer immediately to ensure prompt customer service and avoid any perception of delay. Option C. Consult U.S. Foods Internal Compliance Department or legal counsel to clarify the regulatory requirements and company policies regarding the release of such data before responding to the customer. Option D. Inform the customer that U.S. Foods cannot share any data that might contain employee PII due to privacy concerns, without further investigation. Correct answer is C. Consult U.S. Foods Internal Compliance Department or legal counsel to clarify the regulatory requirements and company policies regarding the release of such data before responding to the customer. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts between company policy, regulatory requirements, and ethical considerations in handling sensitive customer information. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that all actions taken are compliant with U.S. federal and state laws governing data privacy and security, as well as U.S. Foods internal policies, while also maintaining customer trust. A hasty or uninformed decision could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of business. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of relevant U.S. regulations, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, if any customer data handled by U.S. Foods falls under its purview, e.g., related to healthcare providers, and general data privacy principles applicable to business operations. It also necessitates adherence to U.S. Foods-specific data handling and security protocols. This approach is correct because it prioritizes legal compliance and ethical data stewardship, safeguarding both the company and its customers. By consulting the designated internal resources and legal counsel, the employee ensures that any action taken is informed by the most current and accurate regulatory guidance and company policy, thereby mitigating risk. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the potential regulatory implications and proceed based on assumptions or convenience. For instance, Sharing the information without verifying its sensitivity or the recipient's authorization would violate data privacy laws and company policy, leading to potential breaches and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request entirely without proper communication or escalation, which could damage customer relationships and signal a lack of responsiveness. Finally, attempting to interpret complex regulations without expert guidance is risky. Relying solely on personal understanding could lead to misinterpretations and noncompliance, exposing U.S. foods to significant liabilities. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the nature of the information and the request. Second, consult relevant company policies and procedures. Third, research applicable U.S. federal and state regulations. Fourth, seek guidance from internal legal or compliance departments if ambiguity exists. And fifth, act only after confirming compliance and authorization. This systematic approach ensures that all decisions are legally sound, ethically responsible, and aligned with organizational objectives. Question 15. What factors determine the appropriate labeling and handling procedures for a new line of prepackaged salads introduced by U.S. Foods, ensuring compliance with all applicable U.S. federal regulations? Option A. A comprehensive review of current FDA regulations, including FSMA and FD&C Act labeling requirements, alongside internal quality control protocols. Option B. Adherence to the labeling and handling practices used for similar products in the past, assuming they were compliant. Option C. Relying on general industry best practices for food products without specific verification against U.S. federal mandates. Option D. Prioritizing cost-effective packaging solutions and expedited shipping methods to meet market demand. The correct answer is A. A comprehensive review of current FDA regulations, including FSMA and FD&C Act labeling requirements, alongside internal quality control protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because U.S. Foods, as a food distributor, operates within a highly regulated industry where compliance with food safety, labeling, and transportation laws is paramount. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to these regulations can lead to severe consequences, including product recalls, fines, reputational damage, and potential harm to consumers. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all operational decisions, particularly those involving product handling and information dissemination, align strictly with the U.S. regulatory framework governing food businesses. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) regulations, specifically the Food Safety Modernization Act (FSMA), and relevant labeling requirements under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act (FD&C Act). This approach prioritizes accurate product information, adherence to good manufacturing practices, GMP, and proper handling procedures to prevent contamination and ensure consumer safety. Regulatory justification stems from the FDA's mandate to protect public health by ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biological products, medical devices, our nation's food supply, cosmetics, and products that emit radiation. Adherence to these regulations is not merely a best practice but a legal obligation. An incorrect approach that relies solely on historical practices without verifying current regulatory compliance is professionally unacceptable. This fails to account for evolving regulations and potential new risks. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal framework designed to protect consumers. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost saving over regulatory adherence, such as using unapproved packaging materials or skipping necessary quality checks, directly violates the FD&C Act and FSMA. This can lead to adulterated or misbranded food products, which carry significant legal penalties. Finally, an approach that assumes industry standards are equivalent to legal requirements is also flawed. While industry best practices often align with regulations, they are not a substitute for understanding and complying with specific legal mandates. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the relevant regulatory bodies and specific laws applicable to the situation. This involves proactive research, seeking clarification from regulatory agencies when necessary, and implementing robust internal compliance programs. A continuous improvement mindset, where policies and procedures are regularly reviewed and updated to reflect regulatory changes, is crucial. When faced with ambiguity, erring on the side of caution and prioritizing consumer safety and regulatory compliance over expediency or cost is the hallmark of professional integrity. Question 16. Operational review demonstrates a potential opportunity for U.S. Foods to streamline its warehouse inventory management system by implementing a new digital tracking technology. However, the proposed system's data logging capabilities may differ from current manual record-keeping protocols, raising questions about its alignment with existing food traceability regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for U.S. Foods to ensure compliance? Option A. Rely on the vendor's assurance that the new technology meets industry standards and proceed with implementation, assuming it will satisfy regulatory requirements. Option B. Proceed with the implementation of the new technology, but only for non-perishable goods, and continue with the manual system for perishable items until further clarification on regulatory requirements is obtained. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed digital tracking technology against all applicable federal and state food traceability regulations, consulting with legal and compliance experts to identify and mitigate any potential compliance gaps before implementation. Option D. Implement the new digital tracking technology immediately to gain efficiency benefits and address any potential regulatory discrepancies discovered during subsequent audits. The correct answer is D. Implement the new digital tracking technology immediately to gain efficiency benefits and address any potential regulatory discrepancies discovered during subsequent audits. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating potential conflicts between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance within the context of U.S. Foods operations. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that any proposed solution to streamline a process does not inadvertently create a compliance gap or expose the company to undue risk under relevant U.S. regulations governing food safety, handling, or transportation. Careful judgment is required to balance the immediate benefits of a proposed change against its long-term legal and ethical implications. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and addressing potential compliance issues before implementing any changes. This means thoroughly understanding the existing regulatory landscape applicable to U.S. foods business, such as those enforced by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, or the Department of Agriculture, USDA, and assessing how the proposed operational change might interact with these regulations. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive review that includes consulting with legal counsel or compliance officers to ensure all aspects of the change align with federal and state laws. This is ethically sound and legally prudent, as it demonstrates a commitment to operating within the bounds of the law and protecting the company from penalties, reputational damage, and potential harm to consumers. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the operational change without a thorough regulatory assessment. This could manifest as assuming existing practices are compliant without verification, or relying solely on anecdotal evidence that the change is acceptable. Such an approach fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of regulations and the potential for unintended consequences. Ethically, it risks prioritizing expediency over responsibility, potentially leading to violations of food safety standards or other legal requirements. This could result in significant fines, product recalls, or even criminal charges, all of which are direct consequences of neglecting regulatory due diligence. Another incorrect approach would be to implement the change and then address any compliance issues that arise. This reactive stance is inherently risky and demonstrates a lack of foresight. It suggests a willingness to gamble with compliance, which is unacceptable in a regulated industry like food distribution. The regulatory framework demands proactive adherence, not post hoc correction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory environment relevant to their specific role and the company's operations. When considering operational changes, the first step should always be a risk assessment that explicitly includes regulatory compliance. This involves identifying potential areas of conflict, consulting relevant regulations, and seeking expert advice, legal compliance, to validate the proposed course of action. If a potential compliance issue is identified, the process should involve modifying the proposed change to ensure adherence, or, if modification is not feasible, abandoning the change altogether. This systematic, proactive, and informed approach ensures that operational improvements are achieved responsibly and sustainably. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent deviation in temperature readings for a critical refrigeration unit storing perishable goods at a U.S. foods distribution center. What is the most appropriate immediate action to ensure regulatory compliance and product integrity? Option A. Attempt to manually adjust the refrigeration unit settings without consulting any internal documentation or personnel. Option B. Immediately halt all operations at the distribution center until the refrigeration unit can be manually inspected and repaired. Option C. Continue operations as normal, assuming the temperature fluctuations are within acceptable minor tolerances and will self-correct. Option D. Immediately escalate the temperature deviation data to the U.S. Foods Quality Assurance (CA) Department for investigation and initiation of corrective action protocols. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the temperature deviation data to the U.S. Foods Quality Assurance (CA) Department for investigation and initiation of corrective action protocols. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires immediate and accurate identification of potential regulatory violations within U.S. foods operations. The pressure to act quickly while ensuring adherence to U.S. federal and state food safety regulations, specifically those overseen by agencies like the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the Department of Agriculture, USDA, for certain products, necessitates a thorough understanding of compliance requirements. The monitoring system's output, while indicative of a problem, requires careful interpretation to determine the appropriate course of action without causing undue disruption or overlooking critical safety concerns. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the monitoring system's data against established U.S. Foods internal policies and relevant federal food safety regulations. This includes cross-referencing the observed deviations with specific good manufacturing practices, GMP, and hazard analysis and critical control points, HAC principles, as mandated by the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. The immediate escalation to the Quality Assurance (CA) Department, who are trained to interpret such data and initiate corrective actions according to regulatory guidelines, ensures that the issue is addressed by the appropriate subject matter experts. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain product safety and comply with all applicable laws. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the monitoring system's alert, assuming it is a minor anomaly. This failure to act directly violates the proactive compliance mandate of FSMA and could lead to the distribution of unsafe products, resulting in severe regulatory penalties, product recalls, and significant damage to U.S. Foods' reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately halt all production without proper investigation. While caution is important, an uninvestigated shutdown can lead to unnecessary financial losses and operational disruptions, and it bypasses the established protocols for addressing quality control issues, which are designed to be efficient and targeted. Finally, attempting to fix the issue without involving QA or documenting the problem would be a critical failure. This circumvents established compliance procedures, prevents proper root cause analysis, and leaves U.S. Foods vulnerable to regulatory scrutiny for lack of documented corrective actions and oversight. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and product safety. This involves 1. Recognizing and acknowledging the alert from the monitoring system. 2. Consulting internal policies and relevant regulatory guidelines to understand the potential implications. 3. Escalating the issue to the designated department, in this case CA, for expert assessment and action. 4. Ensuring all actions taken are documented thoroughly for future reference and audit purposes. This structured approach ensures that U.S. Foods operates within the bounds of U.S. law and maintains the highest standards of food safety. Question 18. Strategic planning requires U.S. Foods to evaluate a new, more cost-effective method for storing perishable goods. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with relevant U.S. federal regulations and internal company policies? Option A. Relying on the vendor's assurances that the new storage method meets industry standards without independent verification. Option B. Implementing the new storage method immediately to realize cost savings, assuming current food safety protocols are sufficient. Option C. Conducting a thorough review of the proposed storage method against the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, and consulting with U.S. Foods legal and compliance departments before implementation. Option D. Proceeding with the new storage method after a brief discussion with the warehouse manager, prioritizing operational efficiency over detailed regulatory checks. The correct answer is B. Implementing the new storage method immediately to realize cost savings, assuming current food safety protocols are sufficient. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to U.S. Foods' internal policies and relevant federal regulations concerning food safety and handling. A new initiative, while potentially beneficial for cost savings, must not compromise the integrity of the food supply chain or violate any legal mandates. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes are thoroughly vetted for compliance before implementation. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive review process. This entails consulting with U.S. Foods legal and compliance departments to ensure any proposed changes align with the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, and other applicable U.S. federal regulations. It also requires evaluating the impact on U.S. Foods' internal quality control procedures and employee training programs to maintain the highest standards of food safety. This approach prioritizes regulatory adherence and consumer safety, which are paramount in the food distribution industry. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the initiative based solely on the perceived cost savings without a thorough regulatory review. This could lead to violations of FSMA, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and potential harm to consumers. Another incorrect approach is to assume that existing procedures are sufficient without specific verification for the new initiative. This overlooks the possibility that the new process might introduce unforeseen risks or require modifications to existing compliance protocols. Finally, prioritizing speed of implementation over thorough due diligence demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential regulatory implications of any new operational strategy. This should be followed by engaging relevant internal stakeholders, including legal and compliance teams, to conduct a risk assessment. The process should include a thorough review of applicable laws and regulations, such as FSMA, and an evaluation of how the proposed changes impact existing policies and procedures. Only after confirming full compliance and mitigating potential risks should an initiative be approved for implementation. Question 19. Strategic planning requires U.S. Foods to consider how its operational expansion into new markets will be managed to ensure full adherence to all relevant U.S. federal and state food safety and labor regulations, while also maintaining a competitive edge. Which of the following approaches best balances these critical requirements? Option A. Meeting only the most basic, legally mandated compliance standards in new markets to minimize initial investment and operational overhead. Option B. Proactively integrating comprehensive regulatory compliance checks and employee training programs into the strategic planning and execution phases for all new market entries, alongside market analysis. Option C. Focusing primarily on securing market share and operational efficiency in new territories, with regulatory compliance being addressed reactively as issues arise. Option D. Delegating all regulatory compliance responsibilities to a newly formed, independent compliance department that will audit expansion plans after they have been drafted by the business development teams. The correct answer is B. Proactively integrating comprehensive regulatory compliance checks and employee training programs into the strategic planning and execution phases for all new market entries, alongside market analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because U.S. Foods, as a large food distributor, operates within a highly regulated industry. Ensuring compliance with food safety regulations, labor laws, and ethical business practices is paramount to maintaining public trust, avoiding legal penalties, and safeguarding the company's reputation. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to these frameworks, especially when faced with pressures that might tempt shortcuts. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement strategies that are both effective and fully compliant. The correct approach involves proactively integrating regulatory compliance into the core of U.S. Foods' strategic planning. This means not treating compliance as an afterthought or a separate function, but as an intrinsic element of business operations. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of regulatory frameworks governing food safety, e.g., FDA regulations like the Food Safety Modernization Act, labor practices, e.g., OSHA, FLSA, and general business ethics. By embedding compliance into strategy, U.S. Foods demonstrates a commitment to responsible operations, minimizes risks of violations, and builds a sustainable business model. This proactive stance is ethically sound and legally prudent, ensuring the company operates within the bounds of U.S. law and industry best practices. An incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term cost savings over regulatory adherence is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the legal and ethical obligations U.S. Foods has to its customers, employees, and the public. Such an approach risks severe penalties, including fines, product recalls, and damage to brand reputation, all of which can have long-term detrimental financial and operational consequences. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting minimum legal requirements without striving for best practices is also professionally deficient. While technically compliant, this reactive stance can leave U.S. Foods vulnerable to evolving regulations and emerging risks. It fails to foster a culture of continuous improvement and ethical leadership, potentially leading to missed opportunities for innovation and a less resilient business. Finally, an approach that delegates all compliance responsibilities to a single department without integrating it into broader strategic decision-making is flawed. This siloed approach can lead to miscommunication, overlooked risks, and a lack of buy-in from other critical business units. Effective compliance requires a company-wide commitment and understanding, integrated into the strategic vision of U.S. Foods. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a comprehensive risk assessment that considers all applicable U.S. federal, state, and local regulations. This assessment should inform strategic objectives, ensuring that any planned initiatives are evaluated for their compliance implications. Furthermore, fostering a strong ethical culture, providing ongoing training, and establishing clear accountability mechanisms are crucial for embedding compliance into the daily operations and strategic direction of U.S. Foods. Question 20. The evaluation methodology shows that U.S. Foods is introducing a new line of frozen desserts. To ensure regulatory compliance and maintain product integrity, what is the most appropriate initial step for the U.S. Foods compliance team to take regarding this new product line before it is distributed to customers? Option A. Rely on the supplier's certification that the frozen desserts meet all necessary U.S. food safety standards and proceed with distribution once the supplier provides this documentation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable U.S. federal and state food safety regulations specifically pertaining to frozen desserts, including storage temperature, labeling, and allergen information, and verify that the new product line meets all these requirements. Option C. Initiate immediate distribution of the frozen desserts to gather customer feedback on product quality, with a plan to address any regulatory issues that may arise post-distribution. Option D. Review existing U.S. Foods internal policies and procedures for general food handling and distribution, and confirm that the new frozen dessert line aligns with these established guidelines. Correct answer is D. Review existing U.S. Foods internal policies and procedures for general food handling and distribution, and confirm that the new frozen dessert line aligns with these established guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee at U.S. Foods to navigate potential conflicts between company policy, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance in a real-world operational setting. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that all actions taken by U.S. Foods employees, particularly those involving customer interactions and product handling, strictly adhere to the relevant U.S. federal and state regulations governing food safety and distribution. A failure to do so can result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and harm to consumers. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented adherence to U.S. Foods' established compliance protocols and relevant U.S. food safety regulations. This means ensuring that all training materials and operational procedures are up to date, readily accessible, and understood by all relevant personnel. When a new product or process is introduced, a thorough review against existing regulations and internal policies is paramount. This includes verifying that all necessary certifications, handling procedures, and labeling requirements are met before the product reaches customers. This approach is correct because it demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance, which is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation for any food distribution company operating in the United States. It aligns with the principles of due diligence and risk management, ensuring that U.S. Foods operates within the bounds of the law and maintains the highest standards of food safety. An incorrect approach would be to assume that existing general training is sufficient without specific verification for new product lines or operational changes. This failure to conduct a specific review for the new frozen dessert line could lead to non-compliance with specific temperature control, storage, or labeling regulations that might be unique to that product category. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of market entry over thorough regulatory review, potentially bypassing necessary checks. This would be a direct violation of the principle of acting with integrity and prioritizing safety and compliance. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on supplier assurances without independent verification of compliance with U.S. food safety laws. While suppliers have responsibilities, U.S. Foods, as the distributor, ultimately bears the responsibility for ensuring the products it handles meet all regulatory requirements. Professionals at U.S. Foods should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a compliance-first mindset. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory bodies and their specific requirements, e.g., FDA, USDA, state health departments. 2. Thoroughly understanding U.S. Foods' internal policies and procedures related to food safety and distribution. 3. Conducting a risk assessment for any new product or process, specifically identifying potential compliance gaps. 4. Implementing a verification process to confirm adherence to all identified requirements. 5. Documenting all compliance efforts and decisions. 6. Seeking clarification from legal or compliance departments when uncertainties arise. This systematic approach ensures that operational decisions are grounded in regulatory reality and ethical responsibility.